Why are you wearing that? It's not even Christmas yet. Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. And I've got another silly video today. So this was not the video that I was going to make today. I pushed that video off to later. But there was a comment on one of my recent videos that got me to thinking about this subject. And, you know, the terrible thing about booktubers is if they get to thinking about something, they end up making a video about it, whether they should or not. So here I am making a video about this, and it's all about reading speed. The speed at which we read. And whether it should even matter how fast we read a book. It matters to some of us, but sometimes I think it matters more than it should. And there have been plenty of times recently where I've playfully griped about my speed at reading and about how fast some of my fellow booktubers read. And the reason for that is because of the whole 500 book challenge and how fast I'm going to get through 500 books. Now, I know that it's going to take years to read the 500 books in the 500 book challenge, the challenge where I read 500 of the books that I own before I will buy any new books. It's a challenge that's going to take years. And there's a few of us booktubers who are doing this challenge. And not just the 500 book challenge, but also the 100 book challenge. And a few of us who are doing this are all speaking together in a Voxer group and will give each other updates about not only how quickly we're getting through books, but the books that we are reading for the challenge. And out of everyone, I am the slowest. Everyone who is doing either the 100 or the 500 book challenge that are in this group, they're all blowing past me as far as the speed at which they read these books. And the reason I'm talking about it at all is because on a recent video that had nothing to do with this subject, somebody, I won't say who, and I won't read the comment, but the gist of the comment was basically, hey, there's this booktuber who claims that they read this many books, a ton of books. And the commenter is basically insinuating that this booktuber, who is obviously Steve Donoghue, is lying about how fast he reads the books that he reads. No reason, really, for this comment to be on this particular video, but there it was. And it made me think, and I think it was there because I have mentioned how fast I think I did mention how fast I read books in this comment, in this video. And that's probably why that comment showed up, but really there was no real reason for it. But it made me think about this subject because it is a subject that I bring up sometimes, at least since I've been doing the 500 book challenge. But I wanted to say, right off the bat, it doesn't really matter how fast you read a book. It's not a competition. It's really not. It's not a race. Nobody really cares. I mean, they shouldn't anyway. I'm sure, okay, there's some people that might care, but nobody should care how fast you read a book or how quickly you get through a book. That's not the point of reading books. The point is not how many books you get through. The point is enjoying the reading experience. Now, those of us on Booktube sometimes feel pressure to read a lot of books because we have a channel in which we talk about books. So it would be helpful to us, one would think, if we could read a bunch of books so we can talk more about the books that we read. But I think even in the case of booktubers, it's not as big a deal as sometimes we make it. I think sometimes we put pressure on ourselves when it is unnecessary. But let's talk about some of the booktubers I've mentioned, because for a person who's not on Booktube, or even a person who is on Booktube, and hears booktubers talk about all the gazillion books that they read in such short amounts of time, it does get people wondering, well, how is this possible? How is this possible? How do these people get through these books so quickly? I would like to read 40 books a month. So let's not beat around the bush. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about this subject. Steve Donoghue is the person I started with. Now, he is an extreme case. There are probably more than a few people who are suspicious about Steve's outrageous claims of how many books he reads. But here's the thing. Steve Donoghue is a special case. He is not like the rest of us in that his whole job is reading books, right? He's a book critic. He's a professional book critic and editor. All he does for a living is read and write. That's what he does. That's his job all day long. So, and he sleeps like 4 hours a night. So most of his time, the time that isn't spent doing other things that are absolutely necessary or walking his dog, which actually is absolutely necessary, other than absolutely necessary things for the most part, he's reading. And one has to figure that if you're reading for a living, if that's your job, you're going to develop the skill of reading very, very fast, right? So Steve is not exaggerating when he says he will read 1 or 2 books a day or more. He can sit down with the average size book and just read it through, right? He'll just sit there and read it. No, Rhonda, it's true. Rhonda doesn't believe it, but it's true, Rhonda. He could just sit down there and just read a book and put it down, and later on he'll just read another book. It's a skill he developed because it's his job. If he doesn't do it, he will die. Think about that. He will starve to death if he doesn't do this, because this is what he does. This is his job. He has to pay for his own medical insurance. He has to pay for his dog's food. His dog will die too if he doesn't do it. This is a lot of motivation. So if you were equally motivated, if it was your job to only read books and write about them, you would find a way to read a lot of books. You would develop that skill. It's a possible thing to do. So he is an extreme case. But still, there are other booktubers who might surprise us by how much they read. But this can be deceiving. It depends on their life situation. Let's take, for example, Another Bibliophile Reads, a fantastic channel, which you should all watch. Another Bibliophile Reads is fantastic. He gets through a lot of books. And I made a joke on our Voxer group that he is going to read 500 books before I read 100 books, because he is getting through books that fast. How? How is that possible? Well, in reality, I think the speed at which I read books is pretty much the same as Greg's from Another Bibliophile Reads. I figured this out last August. Because I had some time off last August. So Greg is retired. He doesn't go to a job every day. He has a lot of time to read. That's what he does. That's his thing. He just, I'm sure he does other things. I'm sure he must. But most of the time, I suspect he's reading. When I had like a week off back in August, which is really, really unusual for me, and I actually had some days when I didn't have to do anything, and it was Garbogust, I noticed that I was getting through books just as quickly as Greg was. The thing is, in that my everyday life, I don't have that much time to read. It, a lot of time it comes down to how much time you actually have to read to get through books. I don't have a ton of it. But as far as the speed at which I read, it's probably roughly equivalent to Greg. Just from that time in August, I'm thinking this, when we were going about the same speed at getting through about the same amount of books that seemed to be of comparable lengths. Now, there are booktubers out here that are just naturally fast, like Brian Lee Durfee, the great booktuber and author Brian Lee Durfee, who has said that he gets through, on average, 100 pages an hour. So he could sit down and, in an evening, read a 300-page book, if he's got nothing else to do. 100 pages an hour is a really good clip. That's faster than me. But it's not supernatural or anything. The only supernatural booktuber out there, I think, is CriminOlly. Because that's a guy who has a job and a family and obligations, and he obviously does these things, and he reads a ton of books. And I know he actually reads them because he talks about them in depth, right? So he's reading these things. He's not just skimming them. He's reading them carefully because you could tell, but because he talks about them. So he's not lying. He's obviously just using sorcery. But does it matter, right? That's the thing. Does it matter that CriminOlly can get through so many more books than the rest of us mere mortals? Probably not. It shouldn't matter too much. It shouldn't really matter how many books you get through a year. 40 books a year is a decent amount of books, really. I will read more than that, but 40 is, pretty good for a person that works and has other demands on their time, because it comes down to that, really, doesn't it? It's how much time we have. When you think about it, every time you do a thing, you're not doing something else, right? So you have to choose to read and choose to spend your free time doing that over other things. Most people are doing a lot of other things for entertainment. Most people are watching television at least a few hours a night, because everybody does, it seems like, in the whole world. And that's why there's 9 gazillion channels to watch now, and all of these different streaming services, because that's what people do in their free time. Most people watch television. But if you're choosing to watch television, you're choosing not to read. It's a choice. Same thing with every other entertainment option that you have. If you're playing video games, there goes that reading time. It's gone. And that's okay. That's fine. I mean, you could do whatever you want to do and live your life the way you want to live it. You will just get through fewer books. But that's okay. You're still a reader, even if you only read a few pages or 20 pages a day. That doesn't mean you're not a reader. You still are. You're just reading books slower than those of us who choose, in the limited amount of time that we have, to spend that time reading. For example, I almost never watch television anymore. Almost never. I'll watch a few different things. But when I do, I'm very conscious of the fact that I could be reading. I also make these videos, which doesn't actually take a ton of time, which you can tell from the quality of my videos. But that is time I'm spending not reading. Most of the time, if I've got free time which I could devote to my personal amusement, I spend that time reading. That's all it is. It's time, and the actual speed at which we read is sort of secondary. I think it's mostly just investing what little time you have and how much time you have to do it. Don't kick yourself because you work a job or possibly 2 jobs and you don't have enough time to read and you don't read as much as these other people do. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it's not a competition. But it also doesn't matter that there are people out there that read tons of books. That's okay too. It's okay that people read fast. It's all right. It's all good. They probably are not lying. It doesn't matter. This was a rambly video. That was my last rambly video of the year. Do you believe that? I don't. But I will catch you next time.